Right. Students, previously we discussed about different types of sentences on the basis of usages, means what are the purpose behind using a single sentence. But today we are discussing about different types of sentences which are mainly based on structure and how we can compose different structures of the sentences. Right, here we go. Actually, the structuring of the sentence based on structuring of clauses and the phrases. I mean, by the use of different clauses, we do form different sentences. So, just to recall about what are the clauses, so one is the independent clause and the other is dependent clause, and the dependent clause at the very same time also called sentence fragment, or you can say simple the fragment. Independent clauses are meant to form a complete sentence, as they can stand alone. Let's suppose I like spaghetti. I like spaghetti is a complete sentence which do have a purpose behind it, and it does not require any information to complete the meaning. He reads many books. So it is also a complete sentence having the complete information in it. So it could also be called a simple sentence. Similarly, when we talk about the dependent clause or the fragment, they are unlike the independent clause. They cannot stand alone. They are not the complete sentences. Let's suppose if I put although before I like spaghetti, it would become dependent clause. Although I like spaghetti, now what happens? What the speaker wants to tell more? Similarly, because he reads many books, it means when we talk about because he reads many books. And if I'm including any kind of this the connective word, the connection or the connector because, so it becomes the dependent, and this is how we can say the fragment. Why we say the dependent clause as a fragment? Because a fragment is the part of a sentence. It's one of the chunk of the sentence. It cannot be the full or the whole sentence. Okay, now how can we compose simple sentences? A simple sentence contains a subject and a verb, and it may also have an object and modifiers. However, contains only one independent clause. So we cannot say that if we merge two independent clauses, they can form a simple sentence. No. Simple sentences are always do have only one independent clause. For example, the example is written here. She wrote. So she is subject, wrote is a verb here, and it is forming an independent clause. An independent clause in a way that it is giving the whole meaning. So it could be called as a simple sentence. Similarly, she completed her literature review. So she completed her literature review. There is an object and a verb and obviously a subject. Excuse me. He organized his sources by theme. He is a subject, organize is a verb, his sources is an object, and by theme is a prepositional phrase we have included here. Another example is they studied APA rules for many hours. It is also a simple sentence because it has only one independent clause. One more thing to be take care of while composing simple sentences or while identifying simple sentences is that if the compound subject is there, so it doesn't mean that having a compound subject in a sentence alter the sentence type. For example, if Sarah and Hira wrote very well. Now Sarah and Hira, the both are the subjects, but here they are referring the both Sarah and Hera refer to the same verb. So it wouldn't be called as the two independent clauses. It would be called as a single independent clause. So that is why may call it a simple sentence. But if the sentence would be like Sarah eats well and Sarah cooks food and Maria uh, Maria writes well. So the both subjects has their own, the both subject do have their own verb here, so we may differentiate it with that of the simple sentences. Now it wouldn't be called a simple sentence. Now moving ahead, the compound sentences. What are the compound? Obviously compound means any kind of mixture of something, having more than one thing. Um, Compound cannot become a simple thing, because compound sentence means merging two or more things. So when you talk about the compound sentence, a compound sentence contains at least two independent clauses. It means it may have more than two independent clauses. So it merge different clauses, or the basically two independent clauses or the independent clauses within a sentence. These two independent clauses can be combined with a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or with a semicolon. We cannot say that all the time we always use some kind of connectors to connect compound sentences or two independent clauses. We do use commas, and we can also use semicolon to show that the sentence is a compound, not a simple sentence. For example, she completed her literature review and she created her reference letter. When you talk about she created her reference letter, it's itself an independent clause. Similarly, she completed her literature review is also a simple sentence, or you can say an independent clause. But we want to merge the both independent clauses into a single sentence, so we can use either a comma, a conjunction, a coordinating conjunction, you can say, or the semicolon. Another thing, another sentence is written here. He organized his sources by theme. Then he updated his reference list. Now, he organized his sources by theme is an independent clause, or you can say a simple sentence. He updated his reference list is also another independent clause. Now, here then is the transition, which is, giving a connection between the two. But if we omit it, it remains the same. Okay, they studied AP rules for many hours, but they realized there was still much to learn. So we have included here but. So but is one of the coordinating conjunction we have used here to combine two clauses, two independent clauses. One thing to look towards to remind is whenever we are using coordinating conjunction to combine two independent clauses, we always use a comma before that. And why we use semicolon to join two independent clauses? Because if the both independent clauses have or possess a strong connection in between, so we use semicolon instead of the coordinating conjunction. Moving ahead, these are the coordinating conjunction we use to make compound sentences. So because we need to combine two things, so we need some glue kind of things, and this is actually the glue of compound sentences. So whenever we are using compound sentences, we can only use these coordinating conjunctions. And except that if we are using any other conjunction, so it may change the meaning from the compound sentence to the other kind of sentence. So here the mentioned coordinating conjunctions they are basically seven, and these are these can be memorized as fan boys, full for and nor, but, or, yet, and so. All right, so when we talk about for, so we can use it to coordinate, to combine two independent clauses. We listen eagerly, for he bought news of our families. He bought news of our families. This is independent clause. We listen eagerly is also an independent clause, but we want to merge the both, so we can use different kinds of coordinating conjunction, and here we have used for. And now she didn't speak to anyone and nobody spoke to her. So nobody spoke to her is independent clause. She didn't speak to anyone is also an independent clause. And now we are combining it by putting and here. But you can see that in every coordinating conjunction, we have put a comma before that. So you need to take care of it while writing something. Now, nor I don't expect children to be rude, nor do I expect to be disobeyed. So this is the two independent clauses here. I do expect to be disobeyed. Sorry, I do not expect to be disobeyed. So to show the negation of something, we use nor. I don't expect children to be rude is another clause, or you can say that independent clause, or the sentence, simple sentence. They rushed to the hospital. They were too late. The both are the both are independent clauses or the simple sentences. Now we are merging it into the one sentence by putting but here. I'll go shopping or I'll go camping. So these are the two sentences or simple sentences. We have merged it in a single sentence by putting an or here. Yet, so Carey was a convicted criminal, yet many people admired him. So these are the two different clauses which are merged by inserting yet. Okay. I was feeling hungry, so I was made myself a sandwich. I made myself a sandwich. I was feeling hungry. The two simple sentences are there, and we have joined it by putting so. Okay. Now the complex sentences. Now what are the complex sentences? Complex means complex, which is very complex. A complex sentence contains at least one independent and at least one dependent. So if there is a sentence which do have more than two independent clauses, or more than one dependent clauses, it could also be called as the complex sentence. So a complex sentence means one should be the dependent and one must be independent. So, although she completed her literature review, she still needed to work on her methods section. Now, the italicized section is independent or dependent. Obviously, it is dependent. Why? Because although is there, which makes the independent clause dependent. She completed her literature review is an independent clause, but when we put although in the very same sentence, it becomes dependent. Although she completed her literature review, what happens next? So she still needed to work on her methods section. So here we have included one independent clause. So here we have formed complex sentence. Because he organized his sources by theme, it was easier for his readers to follow. He organized his sources by theme would be an independent clause, but here we have included because. Now, by adding because, we have formed this sentence as, or this the sentence as dependent. So when it becomes dependent, it requires some other information, and to complete the meaning, we have to use a independent clause. It was easier for his readers to follow. They studied APA rules for many hours as they were so interesting. So, as they were so interesting, it is the dependent clause. And they studied APA rules for many hours is one of the independent clauses. Yes, independent clauses. Yes. How we can form the independent clause into the dependent one. So what things to be included to make independent and a dependent clause? Many but not all dependent clauses use them. Means these are the subordinating conjunctions. Subordinating conjunctions are those conjunction which makes a clause a subordinate clause. Subordinate clause are the same type of the clause, or the same type of the clause, similar kind of the clauses which are called as dependent clause. Subordinating clause and the dependent clause are the same thing. So we use subordinating conjunction to make dependent clauses. So many of the dependent clauses use them, and they join subordinate clause to a main clause and establish a relationship between two. Means if the subordinating conjunctions are used in a sentence, so they form a dependent clause. And these dependent clause they are needed to be joined with an independent clause to form a complete sentence. And the few examples are given here, like after, though, while, as though, whether, until. I have mentioned in the next slide by the categorizing that in what context we use what kind of subordinating conjunction. Here it is that comparison, to show the comparison between two things, we use than rather than, whether, as much as, whereas. And to show the timing of something, sequence of something, so we use after, as soon as, until, whenever, now, that. Concession means when you're giving any kind of relation between the two things. Let's suppose, though, although, in the consequence of something, like even though. Relative pronouns, like who, whoever, whom, whomever, whose, these are the relative pronouns we also studied there in the relative adjectives, or relative clauses. Now, reason, what reasons, to show the reasons we use because, since, so that, in order to, as. And to show the condition we use if, only if, unless, provided that, assuming that. Now, to show the place, where, wherever. Relative adjectives, that, whatever, which, whichever. And the manner means adjectival clause to show how, as though, as if. So these are the different subordinating conjunctions we use when we are making an independent clause into the dependent clause to form a complex sentence. Okay, now this is the structure of complex sentence. So complex sentence do have two components. One is main, that is called independent clause, and which can also be termed as the simple sentence. And the other one is the dependent clause, which is always incomplete, which always requires some information to complete the meaning. And it is also called the fragment. Okay, now you need to guess what type of sentence is it. Now the first sentence is, the weather is pleasant in Jamaica unless there is a hurricane. Now, that means, can you identify what kind of sentence is this? Is it a simple sentence, a compound sentence, or a complex sentence? The weather is pleasant in Jamaica is a sentence, and there is a hurricane is also a simple sentence. Now, you have to point out unless. Now, unless is not a coordinating conjunction, but it's a subordinating conjunction. So when we are using subordinating conjunction in a sentence, it means that it is forming a dependent clause. So if there is a dependent clause in a sentence along with an independent clause, it forms a complex sentence. So it is a complex sentence. Now the other one is, it makes sense to do the most difficult jobs first. What kind of sentence is this? It's a simple sentence. Why? Because there's only one subject and one verb. Now, to do is, to make you confused. It is called as a to infinitive. To infinitive is type of the verb which helps the main verb to indicate something, right? Okay, another one. Skiing is my favorite hobby. Now, skiing is my favorite hobby is a simple sentence. Very simple. I met my wife in London where she grew up from a young age. Now, what type of sentence it is? Yes, it is a complex sentence. We can say complex. Why? Because the coordinating conjunction is not used in a sentence. There is a subordinating conjunction where. Let's suppose if the sentence is like, I met my wife in London and she grew up from a young age. She grew up here from a young age. Let's suppose the sentence would be like this. So it would be compound sentence because two main clauses are there, means two independent clauses are there. But here The by adding where we have made the independent clause a dependent one. Once my husband finishes work, we will go shopping. Now, what is the sentence? Yes, it's so simple that it's a complex sentence. Why is it so? Because by putting once here, I'm giving a condition that when one thing is done, then the other thing happens. So the other thing is actually dependent on the first one. Okay, my son has to be in at 7 o'clock because I told him to be. My son has to be in at 7 o'clock. Because is is what coordinating conjunction. So if we use coordinating conjunction between two sentences or two clauses, they form compound sentence. She got her first dog when she was 4 years old. So where here when is used. So when means I'm giving a condition. So to when we provide a condition about something or about the other happening, so it forms a complex sentence, not a compound. You should take an umbrella on because it will rain today. Because okay, now here the because is here. So it is, one of the coordinating conjunction of fanboys. From fanboys, B is because. So we have used here because, so it is forming a compound sentence. Okay. Now, what is the compound complex sentence? When we talk about compound complex sentence, a compound complex sentence contains at least two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. So a sentence must possess two independent clause at least and one dependent. We cannot use two dependent clause in a sentence, but we can use two independent clauses at the same time in a sentence. She completed her literature review, but she still needs to work on her method section, even though she finished her methods course last semester. What is written here? She completed her literature review is a simple sentence, independent clause. But is used to combine two independent clauses. So it's a coordinating conjunction. She still needs to work on her method section, so it's another independent clause. So two independent clauses are there. Now the other one, even though she finished her methods course last semester. Now even though is not a coordinating conjunction, but it is subordinating conjunction. Means by putting this we are forming a subordinate clause or the dependent clause. So one dependent clause and two independent clauses. Okay, the other example. Although he organized his sources by theme, he decided to arrange them chronologically and he carefully followed the meal plan for organization. Now, the first one is the dependent clause. Although he organized his sources by theme. Now, he organized his sources by theme would be independent, but here by putting although, we have formed the independent clause, a dependent one. He decided to arrange them chronologically is independent, and by combining two simple sentences we can put and here, and it's one of the conjunction of men boys. He carefully followed the meal plan for organization. So two independent, oh sorry, two, sorry, yes, two independent and one dependent. So here we have formed compound complex sentence. One more thing is that there isn't any particular rule of putting the clauses at a particular place. So we can put the clause at anywhere. Means in the beginning, means the dependent clause could come in between, or in middle, or sorry, in the starting sentence, or and at the end of the sentence. Okay, with pizza and soda at hand, they studied APA rules for many hours, and they decided that writing in APA made sense because it was clear, concise, and objective. Now, with pizza and soda at hand, now this is prepositional phrase. It's not a clause because there isn't any kind of verb here. So they studied APA rules for many hours. This is one of the independent clause. And obviously, connecting two independent clauses, they decided that writing in APA made sense. Now, this is another independent clause because it was clear, concise, and objective. It was compound sentence, means simple sentence. Now this is how we can form compound complex sentence. Compound complex sentences can be, used in a way that to form multiple ideas within a sentence. And we can use subordinating and coordinating conjunction both at in a single sentence. When we are combining two independent clauses, we use coordinating conjunction. And when we are using an independent clause with that of the along with the dependent clause, so we use subordinating conjunction. Okay, now what are the linking words? Acha, you must have noticed that when we talk about linking words, uh, you may think about the conjunctions. So obviously, conjunctions are those words which are used to connect different ideas within the paragraph, within a sentence, or we can also use conjunction to join two words in even. So linking words are the words, and they actually used to show the cohesion and coherence in in a text. And if the more the means the coherence means the link between different ideas in your passage is strong enough, then only you can form a good composition. Let's suppose when we talk about linking words to show different ideas, so when we transit our ideas from one idea to the other one, we use transition or transitional words. A transition is a word or phrase that shows the relationship between paragraphs or sections of a text or speech. Now, what is the relationship here? It means the relationship between the ideas. Let's suppose we move from one idea to other one. We move from one paragraph to the other paragraph. Sometimes we conclude the things in a single writing. So we should link between the ideas. We should form the strong links between the ideas and between the passage, between the words. And this link actually gives the a cool kind of image to one's writing. And if you are enough, if you are able to compose a writing by using appropriate linking words, it means your writing do have coherence in it, cohesion in it means the word has some kind of sticking quality in between. Means you can the reader can go from one idea to the other one in a smooth way. There must not be some kind of abrupt ending. There must not be, haphazard ideas which are here and there in the passage. So linking words are used in a text to form the cohesion, to form the coherence in the text. So there are three types of linking words we use in the text. One is the transition, which are used to uh, transit from one idea to the other. For example, afterwards, at first means not only the transition, but when we start, firstly it was noticed, secondly, lastly, these are the transition words. At first, initially, meanwhile, meantime, simultaneously, for example, lastly, and all otherwise. One more thing you need to take care of, that whenever we are using linking words or means transition words, we intend to put a comma, and we are required to put a comma after the transition word. Means otherwise comma, and you can compose your own sentence. Similarly, afterwards, we should also put a comma after that. Okay, now the other thing is subordinators. Now, subordinators are the subordinating conjunction which we have discussed before some time. So, when we talk about subordinating conjunction, we should use two kind of sentences in a single sentence, or you can say that two kind of clauses in a sentence to form the connection between them. When we talk about complex sentences or the compound complex sentences, we do use subordinating conjunctions, and we can also call it subordinators. There are here is a list of different words like before, as long as, at the same time, every time, since, so long as. Now, when you write something, the first, second, next, last time, when, whenever, while, by the time, till, until, and all the subordinating conjunctions or the subordinators do have different quality. Means they do refer to they do refer a different type of idea. We cannot say that all of the subordinating conjunction or any of the subordinating conjunction can be used at any place, because every subordinating conjunction do have a particular meaning in it, and we cannot use to show. Sometimes they can be overlap. Means at the same place we can use uh, as long as, and say similarly we can use since at that time. There are certain points in which we can use more than one subordinating conjunction, which can show the equal meaning of, which can show the intended meaning of the writer or the speaker. So there can be, overlapping of these types of things. Okay, now what are the coordinators? Coordinators means fanboys, which are used to form compound sentences. Not only the compound sentences, but they are also used to connect paragraphs. Sometimes, there are certain sentences which are starts with as, with because, and so, there are they are sentences, so they are also used to show the idea which was discussed before that sentence. One more thing is that fanboys are the sentences, sorry, are the words, like for, and, nor, because, or, yet, and so. So these are the words which are used to connect two independent clauses. So we can form compound sentences by using the any of these conjunction. Okay, now here we end. So you can, write different kinds of things on your own by making different kind of sentences, and by using these kinds of connectors to show the cohesion and coherence in your text. And this is how you can form a good writing on your own. Thank you.